Hello everyone.
Hello.
Both on location and all the millions of people out there watching live, potential millions at least. I hope everyone had a very transcendent and meaningful Passover. The word Passover means to pass over. Pesach, it's about transcendence and freedom, which is more than just physical freedom of freeing ourselves from shackles and bonds, but also spiritual freedom, psychological freedom, emotional freedom, which is a far greater prison. The fears and inhibitions and the psychological traps and insecurities that haunt us in many ways are often deeper and darker than any physical prison, as some of us are probably quite aware of. So I hope Passover helped free ourselves from some of that. And now, post-Passover, begins a tradition. It's called the counting of the Omer. I'll explain that in a moment, but I just want to begin by also dedicating this class to Avram, son of Julie, and Rebecca, the daughter of Esther. May they be blessed with abundant channels of finding love and happiness in their own particular way, unique way, and the theme of this class obviously will be very appropriate to that discussion. So it's in their honor, and obviously in honor of everyone else who's listening. So to go back to the point I was making, one of the key challenges in presenting ideas, you can clearly see the way I'm dressed. I have a beard and a yarmulke, so I project a certain image. And this image for many is not necessarily a positive image, especially if you watched any Woody Allen films or other stereotypes that American culture imposes on what some would coin as being this ultra-orthodox Haredi or reactionary or primitive look. However, the truth is Judaism has been around now for over 3,000 years, and you have to appreciate and respect something that's been around that long. Something must have been right. The longevity, and in fact, what we have is a long, maybe the best kept secret, which is that Judaism presents a very comprehensive and contemporary perspective on life. And one of the key things I try to do with my life is to serve as a bridge, having grown up steeped in Jewish teachings, but also recognizing how irrelevant these teachings are to so many, to try to show how their relevance is personal and addresses our particular and day-to-day struggles. So Passover can be experienced just as any other Jewish tradition as a mechanical and static holiday, or it can be appreciated if we understand the soul of the message as something that is profoundly relevant, that can really help us deal with our challenges and our struggles and all the other things that we experience. I don't know if it's $1 trillion industry or $1 billion industry, but therapy is definitely a very big industry today. And people go to try to find some calm, some relief, some peace, some answers to their conflicts, whether it's interpersonal, intrapersonal. So the fact is, Torah is really the original psychological blueprint, because what it does is it gives us a snapshot, especially when you study the mystical parts of it, a snapshot of the soul, a snapshot of our psyches. And just like when you need to go to a doctor and you ask a doctor, and you tell a doctor your symptoms, and an X-ray is taken or a CAT scan, and it gives you a picture of your inner being, your inner body, so to speak, the inner organs, the internal organs. The same is with the Kabbalah and mysticism and Torah. It gives us a snapshot, an X-ray of the soul, because the psyche is also made up of components. And though we can't tangibly touch it as much as we can touch the physical body, but the physical body is also full of mystery. Either you take the human brain, with all the knowledge we have, very little is known about this brain. So clearly about the soul we know even less, and yet Judaism has always presented the soul as a dynamic force of energy that has components. And you could actually diagnose what the soul state is when you understand its parts. Hence, this leads us to this period that follows Passover, is an intense character refinement and personality development period, which consists of 49 days. From Passover till the next holiday, Shavuos, is 49 days. And these 49 days correspond to 49, 7 times 7, 49 emotional faculties and attributes that each human being, each of us has within us. So actually, your heart and soul and psyche is made up of 49 pieces. Not physical pieces. The physical, we'll call it, how shall we say it, permutations. And I'll spell them out. So I decided to dedicate the next 6 weeks, 7 weeks, between Passover and Shavuos, each week to focus on another one of these 7 attributes and break it down into details in a way that hopefully can help us all understand ourselves in a better way. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the book I did on the Omer, the spiritual guide to counting the Omer. So you see from that book, you can tell the different pieces and or I spell it out. But I'm going to do it more elaborately here in these classes. Also, just for the record, we just recently released an app, a mobile app of this Omer that you can easily download free at a website called myomer.org. So, just a small few introductions. As I just mentioned in the physical level, the human body is made up of many parts. We have a nervous system, we have a circulatory system, we have a neurological system, we have muscles, we have cells. It's a whole structure. And when everything is going well, thank God, the person is healthy, it all flows. It's like a free flow. And there are no impediments and there are no blocks. And actually, health doesn't feel like anything. If someone asks you, what does it feel like being healthy? If you have any description of what it feels like, it's already a bad sign. It shouldn't feel like anything. Health, like breathing smoothly, should just be seamless, without any particular feeling. If you feel something, that means there's something going on, there's something wrong. The same thing is with spiritual health. Spiritual health, a healthy person, you take of a newborn child, a young child, you just see there's a certain natural exuberance, a natural enthusiasm, a certain type of a flow that is only distorted or becomes stunted when adults get in the way. So then we grow up as adults, we grow up from children into adults, and we begin to be shaped by the toxins of this world. Just like the physical toxins, there's also the emotional toxins. Attitudes of our parents, attitudes of our schools, attitudes of society, and these begin to shape us. And by the time we're adults, we don't always know who we really are, independent of these forces that have affected us. So everyone here, anyone on earth, is no longer a clean slate once you turn into an adult, because there's so many forces that have affected you for good and for bad. The first times we learn about love, the first time we learn about how to solve a problem, it comes usually from our parents, and then from those adults around us, and that's how we learn to solve problems. And if it was taught to us in a distorted or dysfunctional way, that becomes our image, that becomes our so-called model. And we all know there's no model that is perfect. If you grow up in a relatively healthy home, a nurturing home, a loving home, so parents and the environment helps create confidence. As we grow older, we have the courage and the strength to deal with challenges, less fear, and so on. If you grew up in a home that was very fearful and a lot of insecurity, it usually creates insecure children, grow into insecure adults. And then becomes all the complicated, we develop all our complicated defense mechanisms to compensate, and hence the mess that most of us encounter in life, especially when it comes to relationships and personal matters. So there are people who are extremely functional in the business world, and functional essentially on a survival level, but it gets to the deeper labyrinth of emotions and what shapes a human being, there it's usually not so simple. And that's due to all these factors that I'm describing. So what do you do when a person's already now, their so-called emotional life has been somewhat stunted or blunted or distorted? So what you do is you need to have some type of, call it an archetype, some type of standard that you can aspire to, or else there's nowhere to grow. Like, you ever see when they take an X-ray of lungs, someone's lungs, you'll always see near the actual lungs, there's always a X-ray of clear lungs. That's how doctors juxtapose. Now they're trained so they can immediately tell. But for those that aren't trained, they show you, here's what the healthy lungs look like, and here's what we're seeing. And you can see, hey, 1 second, there's something here. This is not functioning completely. And this is not just true with the lungs, it's with anything. So you always need to have a so-called perfect circle upon which we can juxtapose the imperfect circle to be able to see where there are weaknesses, and therefore we can know what we have to do to compensate or to readjust or realign. And this is the same as true psychologically and emotionally. You need to diagnose it, and the only way to do it is, okay, this is healthy love, and where does my love stand in comparison to what healthy love is like? And this is exactly what this counting of the Omer, these 49 days, are about. They're actually in very fine detail address different parts of our emotional life. It deals with essentially 7 components. As I said earlier, break into another 7. So let me spell out what those 7 are. And this week we'll focus on the first 2, being that we're now in the beginning of the second week of the counting of the 49 days. So I'm going to do the first 2, and the next subsequent weeks I'll do each week another one of the 7. So what are the 7? They have Hebrew names, and I'll translate them. The first is Chesed. Literally means love, kindness. The second is Gevura, which literally can be translated as severity, strength, but in our context, let's call it restraint. So if Chesed is the free flow to give, Gevura is like, Chesed is the gas, Gevura is the brakes. It's knowing when to exercise restraint, when to withhold, when to channel, it's tempering the flow, the free flow of love. We'll soon discuss the importance of that. Then comes number 3, and I'm going to be brief, but I'll go through all 7. It's called Tiferet. Tiferet means beauty, but also compassion, empathy, harmony. These are all appropriate ways of describing the third so-called component. And just in case you're not taking notes, the Omer book, again, spells it all out, and it's available online, as well as, I don't know if we have here any books, but I'll let you know more details later about that. Number 4, which is the 4th week, is called Netzach. Netzach literally means Netzach means victory. So this refers to the attribute of ambition, endurance, drive, determination. These are all, again, legitimate translations of that word. Then comes number 5, called Hoid. Hoid has many meanings, but we'll use primarily the meaning of humility, yielding, flexibility. So just like Gvura, for example, tempers and channels love, so Hoid, which is yielding, flexibility, humility, tempers determination and drive. Then comes number 6, which is Yesod, which means literally foundation. In the emotional spectrum, we'd call it bonding, connecting. So you're connecting to something that you really are attracted to. It could be an item, it could be an idea, it could be a person. And then finally, number 7 is Malchut. Malchut literally means dignity, nobility. It's a sense of dignity and majesty. You can have love, you can have restraint, you can have all the other 6 I mentioned. If you don't have dignity, there's no self-confidence, self-esteem. These 7 are absolute necessary components in everything we do. If our lives lacking one of these 7, there'll be something seriously missing. So it's just like we have a mind and a heart, and we have arms and legs, and I said nerves and muscles and blood vessels and so on. And without one of them, the body cannot be complete. The same is true in the emotional spectrum. These 7 identify the entire spectrum of all human experiences. Everything fits into these 7. So there's nothing that you do, there's no reaction you have, for good or for bad, that does not have some type of configuration of these 7. But to make things a little more complicated, obviously these 7 are 7 general attributes or general archetypes. These 7 break down into 7, and therefore we have the 49. What does that mean? It means that love needs all the 7 within love. Restraint needs all the 7 within restraint, and so on. And that's where it becomes far more detailed and far more relevant to our lives. So just for example, and this is what I'm going to address tonight in more length, love. Okay, some people are very good at love. They know how to give, they like to give, they enjoy loving, they enjoy giving, and so on, but they don't know when to stop. Right? And sometimes love can overwhelm somebody. You could be giving and giving and giving with all the good intentions, but the person that you're giving love to is unable to contain all your love. You can end up hurting that person and doing the exact opposite of what your goal was. Take an example. Rain. When rain falls, it's a blessing. It makes the crops grow. But only when they come down as raindrops. Imagine the rain coming down in buckets or a flood. What will happen? it will overwhelm, it will flood the fields. And instead of actually making it grow, it becomes as destructive as if it was a drought. The beauty of rain is that it comes down in drops, meaning contained. So there's time for the earth to absorb those drops, and then more drops come down. So you see, the wisdom of the art of love is not just knowing how to give, but it's also knowing at what pace and in what measure to give. So gvura, the second emotion, is necessary. If chesed doesn't have gvura in it, it's not going to be complete. And let's take the third one. Love is important, but there could be love with compassion. There can be love without compassion. You may think they're the same thing. They're not the same thing. Compassion, sometimes love can be also tough love. And compassion has an element of softness, of gentleness in love. And as you go down the line, love needs endurance. It needs drive. There are people that are very loving, but as soon as there's a crisis or there's a conflict, they're out. They're absentee because they can't deal with challenge. Love needs, sometimes you have to fight for it. Sometimes you need determination, a drive that pushes the love. People can be very weak. They love when everything is fine. As I said, when there's some resistance or some challenge, they're nowhere to be found. Then you can have the opposite. You can have a person who's very drive and very aggressive, but sometimes at the expense, again, of being too aggressive, and you need to have flexibility. You may be so confident of something and so sure, and you could insist and try to impose on the person you love something, and you may lack the sensitivity necessary. Sometimes you have to be flexible. You have to yield. Not always you have to win an argument. Not always you have to be the one that comes out right. As they say, it's not always important to be right. It's important to be true. It's not about who wins. Sometimes you need the flexibility, and that's far more important for the loving relationship than just shared determination, ambition, and drive. And then you need the bonding element within love and the dignity within love. A love without dignity can be destructive. There are people who love, but they don't give you the dignity that comes with it. Now, I'm not going to elaborate detail in each of this. I just wanted to give you an example of how these emotions, when you start breaking it down, really become a true X-ray, like a true microscope into your own psyche. And you can ask yourself the question, okay, where does my love stand, and where is my restraint? And you can come with a real decision. Say, I'm very strong in the area of love, but I don't have good discipline. Sometimes it's the other way around. People are real disciplinarians. They're excellent at measuring, at tempering, but they don't know how to just give some at times. Everything is calculated. That's the opposite problem. That's what gvura without chesed. That would be the restraint without the flow. And there are people that way. And also maybe with good intentions. They're disciplined, they're very much rules, but you don't sense a love in it all. Even if their intention is to be loving, their focus is far too much on the discipline part. And down the line, you can go through all the 7, which is why we have these 49 days. And I think of it this way. It's really unbelievable that if you really take each day and focus on that area and ask certain key questions, and then you can say, okay, this is a strength of mine, this is a weakness. You start identifying your own strengths and weaknesses, and you'll be surprised at what kind of insight you'll suddenly get into yourself, even though you may think you know yourself already. But when things don't work, we don't really know what's not working. It's just not working. When you break it into detail, you focus in. Like when you go to a doctor, the doctor's supposed to not just tell you you're in pain. Where's that pain? Is it here? Is it there? We have to isolate it. To just say, I'm not feeling good, doctor, is not going to necessarily help. The joke they tell about these 2 Jews who had terrible pain in their leg, and they really were difficult walking, because they both come to the doctor. One of them goes in to his appointment, the other one's waiting in the hall, in the waiting room. And he hears from behind the door the guy's yelling and screaming, because the doctor clearly was touching with a soft nerve or the tender area, and it was terrible cries, and that alone terrified him. Anyway, after the examination, after his appointment, the guy comes out and he's like sweating and all. He says, "Man, it's very painful. Wait till you have this. Wait till doctor checks you out." Anyway, because he was intrigued, the guy said, "You know what? I'll wait for you." So he remains sitting in the waiting room, and the other guy goes in. They have exactly the same pain, the same foot, and the same part of the leg. He goes in, and it's quiet. He's waiting, nothing, not a peeps. So he's wondering what's going on. Anyway, finally the appointment is over. The guy comes out and he's smiling. He said, "What's going on? You had the same pain as I. What happened?" So he says, "I showed the doctor the other foot. Didn't want to be in pain, so he showed him the other foot." This is like when the guy tells the dentist, "You tell me which tooth hurts." So this is psychologically, we often do this. We tell somebody we got a problem, and then they ask you where it is. They say, "No, it's not there. It's here." I know it's strange because you think, why wouldn't I want to get it healed? But that's how it is. They tell that other Chelam joke. The city of Chelam. They had this. They use this in recovery a lot. The guy's looking for his keys, and late at night, in the dark, he lost his keys. A neighbor comes over and says, "So let me help you look. Well, let's retrace the steps. Where did you lose them?" So he points like 100 yards away. He lost his keys there. He says, "So why are you looking here?" He said, "Because here's where the light is shining." So we all have these bizarre ways of looking at problems, and then it's like hiring a consultant, an advisor, and not listening to them. It's the classic Jewish approach to problems. You pay someone top dollar, and then not to listen to. I need 2 synagogues: the one I go to and the one I don't go to. So to go back to the topic here, the key to solving any issue is never general platitudes. Say, I'm in pain, or my relationship isn't working. What area isn't working? And if you don't focus into the detail, it's equivalent of trying to tell the doctor, my whole body hurts. It doesn't work that way. You got to identify. It could be more than one thing, but it has to be identified. That's the only way to treat it. And often we don't have the patience to do that. And especially in the emotional arena. In the physical arena, it's one thing. You trace a nerve, you trace a pain until you get to the root of it. But in the emotional arena, it's far more complicated because you don't have a physical thing to point to. But nevertheless, as I said earlier, the emotions are made up of very strong components, and it's very different. So when 2 people the relationship could be falling apart for very different reasons. One person is falling apart because there's maybe too much love, and the other one may be falling apart because there's too much restraint. Just to give that example. And so on. So I'm going to discuss a little more at length these first two, because these are the 2 weeks. The first week started Passover the second day. We're already now in the second week. So it's really the beginning of motion number 2. Again, if you follow the Omer book, you can see it on the app or online. We also send out a daily email. If you'd like to sign up, that's also a free service which we send out every day, the daily meditation and exercise. So every day has its particular component. Tonight, for example, is the night of Gvura of Chesed. I'm sorry, the other way, Gvura of Gvura, I should say. The second day of the second week. So let's talk a little more about these 2 forces in our lives. So I identified them earlier as being like love and restraint, or the gas and the brakes, if you wish. And this is very true. With the idea of giving chesed is sometimes compared to water. Restraint and gevura is often compared to fire. So there's another way of looking at water and fire. What's the difference between water and fire? So look at water. Water is free flowing. Unless something impedes the flow, water will flow. It will fit into every crevice. That's its nature. It's flowing. It is refreshing. It brings things to life. Water. We can't live without water. Water also tends to be moist. It tends to expand things. You put something in water, the water will ultimately expand. Put a piece of paper in water, it'll expand, it'll melt it, so to speak. Come to fire. Fire is like a real antithesis to water. Fire is heat. Water is cool. Fire constricts. You put anything in fire, it crushes it. It won't expand. Fire rises, does not fall. It doesn't flow. It's the opposite. It rises upward. Water is whitish blue. Fire is red yellow. And what are those 2 colors elicit in us? You can look at red lights. Why red lights? Because red is a very fearful color. It's a very strong color. It's a color that symbolizes strength. Stop signs are red. Because they associate red. We associate red with fire, with fear, with avoiding it. Things that are bluish-white are very appealing. People are attracted. In the color scheme of things, blue-white is always associated with softness, warmth, and so on. Red is always associated with strength. Not to say red is a bad thing. It's just a different type of energy. You see, red is used when you want to get someone's attention. Red is used as it's like as I said, red alert, those type of things, red. So these physical attributes are just symbolic of their so-called emotional nature. So in emotions as well, there's a thing called we're attracted to something, and then we're repelled by something. Now literally these two forces in life. We're attracted to things, or we're repelled by them. Or of course we can be neutral. But here we're talking about one of the two. Attraction, like water, is a flowing thing. You're attracted to something, you're drawn to it. Repulsion is you withdraw, you avoid it, you pull back. That's one element of it. If you look in life force in life, you need both. Take the heartbeat, take the breath. We don't just inhale, we also exhale. We don't just exhale, we inhale. The heartbeat. The heart contracts and expands. So expansion is like water and chesed, and contraction is like tightening up, is like vura. And all life is determined by these two poles. If you only have free flowing and there's never restraint, you don't have the necessary thrust and energy to move forward. There's a constant ebb and flow, so to speak, which is necessary in anything that is healthy. If too much extreme one, it usually causes problems. So if you look at a cardiogram, right? You look at a cardiogram, you see a healthy heart looks like this, like a wave. If, God forbid, a flat line is not good, and neither are extremes, very high peaks and low valleys. You want to have a perfect flow. This is like the perfect flow. And it even elicits, when you see a flow like that, even at a cardiogram, it creates balance. It's like the waves. You want a wave to be like that. Normal wave, not too high, not too low, and definitely not flat. So life and energy is very much a constant dance of going and returning, called Rotze and Shuv sometimes, tension and resolution. And this is true in all of our lives. People who have much more tension than resolution are anxious, are very tight, are very what's it called, winded. What do we want to say? Tight, wound up. Are full of knots, and so on. That's too much tension. Then there are people who suffer from too much resolution. What I mean by that, they're always calm and relaxed. There's no angst. Everything is cool, everything fine. No drive, nothing to look forward to. And it's just a type of almost like a flat life. The human being by nature needs to have a certain healthy measure of angst, some type of frustration, healthy frustration, that drives you, that says, I'm missing something, I want more. If you don't have that, you're not going to search for more. Why would you? Animal bliss is not even though many people aspire it, it's not exactly a human attribute, just to be able to graze in a field all day without any issues. On the other hand, too much tension brings to neurosis or worse, and that's also not healthy. So this dance is really the challenge in life. How do you find balance? Because we see this all the time. You see people going from one extreme to the next. They're so bored and so life is so monotonous, and they suddenly break out and they don't know how to stop. Stop partying, so to speak. And then there are people, other extreme, that are so partying all the time till they crash, and they just go into this funk and into this depression and don't know how to get out of that. And the challenge is, how do you find balance? I'm just trying to demonstrate how Chesed and Gvura, these two first attributes, are critical literally in any formula and in any given situation. Now in relationships, it's actually all gets amplified. Because in a relationship, the whole idea of a relationship is exactly that. As I mentioned before, there are people who are very good at loving. They know how to give, they're comfortable giving, and they give freely. But they may not be able to know how to balance it, how to temper it. Parents can destroy children in spoiling them by giving, and never stopping. Then, of course, there's a situation where people have the opposite. They're so calculated and so measured, you stop feeling they have a heart. Everything is discipline. Everyone probably can testify. Some people tell you that my father was this way, my mother was that way. Sometimes your father and mother are both one way. And to the extremes. And both can become big trouble. Someone that's so disciplined, everything is calculated and everything is accurate. Problem is, you don't feel a softness, you don't feel a gentleness and a care. And when you don't have that, you don't have nurturing. With all the good intentions of that disciplinarian. And of course, as I stated earlier, just love itself without the discipline part, equally problematic. So in love and relationships, you need to have both elements. And I'll just give you another example of it. You find in relationships very often a problem where there's an imbalance between two individuals, and one annihilates the other. You have sometimes a very strong personality. The other person is a more passive personality. And it works perfectly. The passive one doesn't mind being passive. The aggressive one doesn't mind being aggressive. And it's perfect. The problem is, you have an imbalance. You have an imbalance. And it has to have some point where it's going to crash. Another way to put it is this. As much as we love each other, as much as two people love each other and are close, every one of us always needs our space. And often you'll find that people who love each other end up suffocating one another because they want to be with each other all the time. Not necessarily healthy. There are times where every person needs their space. That's not a sign of lack of love, not a sign of no affection. It's just a matter of recognizing boundaries. Sometimes a person needs to just be themselves. There's an expression, I use the expression in the book, my book, Torah Meaning.
Scattamo stanotti, viri come balla, sutta e fanali chi si scidica. Ballamo stanotti, salta come un'anna, chi pettini di luna in sciolla. Gira musica, gira e non si ferma, come una galla do vento aita. Attira con narina, tamburello e abbacia come sua figliola. Scattamo stanotti, viri come balla, sotto e fanali chi si scidica. Ballamo stanotti, salta come un'anna, chi pettini di luna in sciolla. Sinni e tunu, i voti si danno, tu na poco gli peputia. Sinda affettunu, i cappotti russi e si ricordano da notti buona. Scattamo stanotti, vini come balla, su te fanali chi si scidica. Ballamo stanotti, salta come un'anna, chi pettini di luna in sciolla. Ballamo stanotti, viri come ballo giugiu, viri come balla nanna. Ballamo stanotti, viri come balla nonna, viri come balla zia. Ballamo stanotti, viri come ballo giugiu, viri come balla nanna. Ballamo stanotti, viri come balla nonna, viri come balla